When I, a 25-year-old man, decided to celebrate my engagement with Ellie, my school sweetheart and partner of 8 years, it coincided with my younger brother James's recent graduation from community college. In the midst of our celebrations, my parents requested that I cancel our engagement party to make way for James's graduation party, a demand that led to unexpected family drama. I had sent out invitations for our engagement party, scheduled for last weekend, just 3 days after proposing to Ellie. It was an exciting moment for us, one we wanted to share with our friends and relatives. However, upon sharing our plans, I was taken aback when my parents and James urged me to cancel, revealing their own plans to host a graduation party for James on the same day, a detail they had not previously mentioned. Given that our invitations were already distributed, and considering the importance of our engagement, I suggested that they could reschedule James's event since they hadn't yet sent out their invitations. This solution seemed reasonable to me, but it wasn't well received. My parents, who have historically shown a preference for celebrating James's achievements, were disappointed by my decision. This wasn't the first time I felt overshadowed by James. My childhood and adolescent milestones were often downplayed compared to his. For example, my 5th birthday was a low-key event with a few friends, whereas James's was an elaborate theme party. This pattern continued through our school years, with his achievements always celebrated more grandly than mine. Despite these differences, I maintain a cordial relationship with my family, exchanging greetings on special occasions and offering congratulations on milestones. However, my decision to proceed with the engagement party, rather than accommodate another event for James, has caused a rift, with many relatives choosing to attend my celebration instead. This situation has stirred mixed feelings within our family, highlighting long-standing dynamics that have now come to the forefront during what should have been a joyous time for everyone involved. While my interactions with my family were generally polite, we rarely kept in touch. Neither my parents nor I had any expectations of frequent communication, and we all adapted to this arrangement in ways we deemed appropriate. My relationship with my younger brother James was also strained. Growing up, we often argued or exchanged jabs, and by high school, we had mutually decided it was best not to speak. James's personality and behaviors, shaped by my parents' indulgent treatment, made him challenging to get along with. Despite his troublesome behavior in high school and a failed product management venture with a startup that involved selling graphic printed t-shirts, my parents remained uncritical and supportive, even when his business flopped and they lost their investment. When it came time for James to attend college, his grades and gap years limited his options to community college, where he pursued a business degree. Amidst these developments, I got engaged to my longtime girlfriend, and we planned an engagement party. Coincidentally, my parents decided to throw a graduation party for James on the same day as my engagement party. They hadn't sent out invitations yet when I announced my party plans, and when informed, they demanded I cancel or reschedule mine. I found this demand unreasonable, especially since my invitations were already distributed. I suggested they could reschedule their event, but they were displeased with my stance. During a heated phone call, my parents accused me of being antagonistic toward James. Trying to avoid further conflict, I firmly stated my intention to proceed with my engagement party as planned, then ended the call and chose to block them to prevent more distressing interactions. In the days leading up to the parties, my relatives received invitations to both events, causing confusion. I opted to stay out of the drama, informing them they were welcome to attend either event and I would respect their decision. Despite hoping for a good turnout at my own celebration, I didn't want to pressure anyone. However, I later discovered that my parents were actively discouraging relatives from attending my engagement party, falsely claiming I had scheduled it to clash with James's graduation intentionally. Faced with their smear campaign, I felt compelled to clear the air. Without resorting to dishonesty, I communicated with all invited guests, explaining the true sequence of events and the conversation that had transpired with my parents. By sharing my side of the story openly, I aimed to counteract the misinformation and maintain my integrity amidst the family turmoil. From my early childhood, I've always felt overshadowed by my brother James, who was the celebrated child of our family. This pattern of favoritism persisted, and though I had come to terms with it over the years, I couldn't agree when my parents expected me to postpone my own engagement celebration to accommodate another event for James. I made it clear to my relatives that if they chose to believe my parents' side of the story over mine, it would be best if we didn't keep in contact. My message was straightforward, and although I was anxious about their response, the support I received was overwhelming. Many relatives, especially those of my generation, immediately expressed their understanding and assured me of their attendance. The night of the party was fantastic. Almost everyone invited showed up, and it was clear they didn't buy into the false narrative my parents were pushing. People at the party shared that they recognized the unfairness I had faced growing up and applauded me for standing up to my parents' unreasonable demands. The engagement party was a huge success, not just in terms of fun, but also in affirming that many family members recognized the disparity in how my parents treated James and me. This validation was incredibly fulfilling. However, the next morning brought a challenging situation. My parents and James showed up at my doorstep, eager to confront me. They accused me of sabotaging James's celebration out of jealousy, a claim that couldn't be further from the truth. They revealed that hardly anyone attended James's party, and those who did left quickly, likely to attend my engagement party. They were upset about the message I had sent around, explaining my side of the story. In the heat of the moment, I defended my actions, explaining that I had been forced to clarify the situation because they were trying to smear my reputation with lies. Unfortunately, they weren't receptive to my explanations and continued to accuse me aggressively. It was evident that no productive conversation could happen in such a heated atmosphere. Ellie, seeing the futility of the discussion, firmly told them to leave or she would call the police. They left reluctantly, hurling insults as they went, and James slammed the door on his way out, rattling the windows with the force of his exit. This confrontation was painful but underscored the deep-seated issues within our family dynamics. It highlighted the need for clear boundaries and possibly a more permanent distance to avoid further conflict and preserve my and Ellie's peace as we planned our future together. Shortly after my parents and James stormed out, I received a message from an unknown number, likely used by a friend or someone from their side since we had blocked all their numbers. The message expressed disappointment in my decision to hold my engagement party on the same day as James's graduation. They mentioned that James was self-conscious about graduating at 29 and that his business failure had left him with little to celebrate, claiming they were merely trying to lift his spirits. They admitted to speaking poorly of me out of desperation for his party's success, and even offered an apology, but it felt tinged with manipulation. This message left me and Ellie feeling quite conflicted. On one hand, the apology could be genuine remorse. On the other, it seemed like another tactic to sway our feelings. Despite the confusion, I knew this was a classic case of manipulation, clouding genuine emotion with calculated move. Over the years, my relatives have always been supportive, and in their defense, they've done what they could. They've tried to mediate and have spoken to my parents about the unequal treatment between James and me, though without success. My expectations from my parents had diminished long ago, and as long as I was financially independent, I was content. I've maintained good relations with the rest of my family and made it clear during the party that I didn't expect anyone to choose sides between us and my parents or James. Most of my family attended my engagement party, and I was satisfied with that, appreciating their support without demanding they sever ties with my parents or brother. Reflecting on the comments from an earlier discussion I had shared online, I realized that I had no reason to apologize for how I managed the situation. I continued to keep my parents and James blocked, including the unknown number from which they had contacted me. I messaged back stating my preference to not communicate further and asked them to respect my space. For the next few days, there was silence from their end, which was a relief. However, things took a turn when, just as Ellie and I were preparing to leave for work, my mother showed up at our door. Unlike previous encounters with both parents and James, it was just her this time. Known for being quieter and more composed, I decided to let her in, hoping we could engage in a more mature and calm discussion. Once inside, she expressed her intent to talk to both Ellie and me. It seemed like an opportunity to perhaps mend some fences, or at least clarify misunderstandings without the heightened emotions of previous confrontations. When my mother arrived at our home, she initiated the conversation by expressing regret over the recent tumultuous events and offered an apology on behalf of herself, my father, and my brother. While I appreciated the gesture, it felt insufficient. True remorse, I believe, would have involved all two of them personally expressing their apologies, not just sending my mother as a messenger. My mother then mentioned that although she acknowledged their mistakes, she was upset about an incident during their last visit. She respected my decade-long relationship with Ellie and even considered her like a daughter. However, she was perturbed because Ellie had threatened to call the police on my father during that visit. She felt this was disrespectful and believed that Ellie, not yet officially family, owed them an apology for her actions, as did I for not intervening. I was taken aback by this claim. The sincerity I had hoped for in my mother's visit seemed overshadowed by another set of demands, this time for apologies from us. Frustrated, I responded that while I recognized her effort to make amends by coming over, it was misplaced. I was disheartened that even in a calmer, one-on-one setting, she was unable to see past their own grievances to genuinely reconcile. I explained firmly that Ellie's reaction was justified, considering my parents had shown up uninvited and created a confrontational atmosphere right at our doorstep. It was they who had escalated the situation by immediately hurling accusations and screaming, not us. I stressed that whether or not they saw Ellie as family was irrelevant to me. She was my family and had every right to defend our home and her space. I made it clear to my mother that neither Ellie nor I owed them an apology. In fact, at this point, I did not desire one from them either. I asked her to leave since the conversation was going nowhere, and her presence was only prolonging the conflict. She resisted at first, unwilling to accept this boundary, but I stood firm. Our discussion grew heated, and eventually she stated that if I truly wished for no further contact, they would oblige. After she left, Ellie and I were significantly delayed for work, but I felt a resolution had been reached, at least temporarily. This painful interaction seemed to finally set the boundaries I had long needed with my family. Moving forward, I decided that any future uninvited appearances at our home would result in me calling the police. I hoped this clear stance would deter further disruptions and finally allow Ellie and me some peace. 5 weeks have passed since that day, and while Ellie and I had hoped the issue would settle down, it seems there might be new developments involving my parents reaching out to Ellie's family. Ellie and I have been together for a decade, and over that time, our families have become quite familiar with each other. Living just a couple of blocks apart, our parents occasionally cross paths. However, one late evening, my parents decided to visit Ellie's parents unexpectedly. They wanted to discuss what they called our horrible behavior. At first, Ellie's parents were hesitant to let them in, aware of our recent disputes, but they didn't want to turn them away outright. Once inside, my parents began to lament their perceived failures in raising me, contrasting my actions with James, whom they praised as the epitome of a good son. They described how James chose to live at home, supposedly to care for them in their old age, though the reality that he couldn't afford to live on his own was the unspoken truth. As my parents continued, it became apparent to Ellie's parents that they might have been slightly tipsy. The conversation soon turned to Ellie, accusing her of disrespect during their last encounter, claiming she had changed for the worse since our engagement. They even hinted that her quiet and shy demeanor had been a fade. My parents then revealed their brilliant plan to Ellie's parents. Neither set of parents would pay for our wedding, hoping this financial pressure would force us to apologize and fall in line. Unsurprisingly, Ellie's parents didn't entertain this plan. They called us shortly after my parents left, recounting the bizarre episode. We couldn't help but laugh over the absurdity of it all. I was relieved that Ellie's parents, being the level-headed and understanding people they are, didn't take offense. They reassured us not to worry and resolved to simply not let my parents in next time. Grateful for their understanding, I decided to take additional measures. I planned to unblock my parents just long enough to communicate clearly that they should not bother Ellie's family or anyone else, warning that any further interference might lead to legal action. Although it was more of a bluff, I hoped the stern warning would deter them from any further disruptions. Since then, almost a year has passed, and I've maintained no contact with my parents and James. These months have been incredibly peaceful and fulfilling. 3 months ago, Ellie and I got married in the presence of loved ones. The wedding was wonderful, and we recently returned from our honeymoon. My parents and James didn't reach out, which was a relief as it spared us any potential drama. Now, as we settle into married life, I'm looking forward to spending the rest of my life with Ellie. With her by my side, I feel equipped to handle whatever comes our way, undistracted by familial strife.